Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will everyone please bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight and thank you for your many blessings. Thank you for our freedoms. Thank you for allowing us to live in this country. Thank you for allowing us to live in this state. And thank you for allowing us to live in this city. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask that you please be with our first responders during this time of year and continue to put a hand of healing on this community as we still grieve from the senseless act of violence that occurred Saturday evening. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, well, I guess I better start that way. Mr. Chairman, I would like to add the Sunset Fire Department to collect dues. I talked with Ricky Shepard yesterday, and he was supposed to call, but apparently, if we don't do this tonight, then they will not be able to be on the ballot in March.
Okay.
So I'm going to go on and ask that we put, this is a standard procedure type thing that we do for all volunteer fire departments.
Okay.
And this should not, it's something we've done for, how many fire departments do we have?
18.
18, and I think of the 18, 15 probably, 16 have already done this, and we've done this. So I'm going to just ask that we put them on the agenda and vote to allow them to put their request, allow them to do their presentation at next week's Quorum Court meeting to collect the dues. Put it on the ballot so they can collect their dues, so the county can collect their dues.
Okay. Let's add that then as number 6. Let's put it ahead of public comments. Right after number 5. Okay. Any other changes? We've been told that one of the ordinances here that's on the list, number 3, that we'll be talking about will be taken off tonight, so we'll be dealing with that as we get going. Okay, any other changes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. Okay, we're going to talk about the communication system first. Shep Russell with Bond Counsel, would you please come up, sir? Could you tell me to begin with, did you write all these ordinances?
Sir, which, are you looking at the ordinances that levy a quarter-cent tax for
Yes.
public safety?
Yes, sir.
I did.
Okay. Well, I'd like to go ahead and address that right now. Would you tell us a little bit about this?
About the ordinances, well, one ordinance levies a quarter-cent sales and use tax for a period of 1 year to be used to finance or pay for the acquisition, construction, equipping, and maintenance of public safety communication system facilities.
Okay, the radio system, basically what we call it.
So that's what the first ordinance would do.
Okay,
And if the Quorum Court passed it, it wouldn't be effective unless the voters approved it.
yes, okay. Ms. Madison?
Is this the same ordinance that's on second reading before the Quorum Court?
Yes, we're trying to get this passed, pass it on to Quorum Court for next week.
It's already on second reading before the Quorum Court. That's what I was confused about.
Go ahead.
I just think they was some questions that needed to be answered at the last Quorum Court meeting, and we might not need to answer them here, we might need to answer them at the Quorum Court meeting, but I think that's why it's on there.
Well, I mean, I think we have members that are not here because they're not on the committee, and I think I mean, I'd hate to make him come back, because I think you came from Little Rock, but I think that might be the proper forum for questions. It's on second reading,
Yeah.
so it's not been referred back to this committee, right?
Who is it that's not here? The remainder of the court, you mean?
Well, yeah, we've got absent members that I
Yeah.
think would benefit from the information because it's on second reading at the Quorum Court next week.
Even, I don't think we can hold off on making a decision because people are absent.
Well, I think this ordinance has already come out of committee and is before the Quorum Court. And I'm concerned about the propriety of this committee taking up something that is not before it. So, that's unusual to me.
Let's hear from the bond counsel here.
I was first asked to prepare an ordinance that would involve bond financing for the public safety communication facility system. And sent that, and I understand, I was told, I was not present, that it was read one time. This, then I was asked, well, if we don't do any bonds, could we levy a tax and just do a pay-as-you-go? So that's what that's what these two ordinances deal with. No financing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So from what I understand, we can go ahead, and if we'd like, we can either have on the ballot to have a bond issue to pay up front, or we can pay as we go as a tax revenue comes in.
That is correct.
Okay.
One or the other.
So
And
the first ordinance here is about the bond issue, or is it the second one, the bond issue?
now, what I was told I was going to address had to do with an ordinance to levy a quarter-cent tax with no bonds,
Okay.
and for 12 months to pay for this equipment. It takes two ordinances under state law if you go that route. It takes one ordinance to levy the tax, one ordinance to call the election.
I got, okay, I
With the
got you.
bond, if the tax is only to be used for the bond, then it's all combined according to the state law.
Okay, all right,
And so that's why there's confusion
okay.
here.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was included with the ordinance that was before us at the last meeting? Were both of these included in that ordinance and in our
don't-
packet, or neither, or you don't do both of these?
I don't think the details here were in our ordinance discussion before.
It was a
It's a
little
matter
lacking
we-
in details, that's for sure.
Well, you know, this includes all the details about how it would be handled. And the main thing we're trying to do is get this passed so it can be on the ballot in March.
Well, I don't see how we can change something or modify something that's on second reading. We may have to start over.
Yes, sir.
That's where the discrepancy was, or the disagreement was at the last meeting, is we didn't have enough detail. But we still needed to proceed in time to get this on the March ballot. So tonight we have more details, which the county attorney promised we would have. Is that correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, that was basically my understanding as well. Yes, ma'am, man.
Do I understand that what we're doing here is we're determining and we're gonna vote on whether we're gonna do the bond issue or if we're gonna do the tax and pay for the system as the tax money comes in? Those are the two options. Now, what we've got before the Quorum Court is to pass an ordinance to send the question to the people of Washington County to determine if they want to finance our new communication system countywide. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. That's one ordinance that is,
So there are really two separate issues. This is just determined determining how we're gonna collect the money and pay for it. If we do it with a bond, then that's completely different than if we do it with just collecting the tax money, paying for the system. The minute it's paid for, then that tax sunsets.
That's correct. Well,
Okay.
the tax, under what the two ordinances are, that it sunsets just in 12 months. On a bond, it sunsets when the bond is paid off.
Okay.
So that is a difference
Ms. Madison.
there.
So I pulled up the agenda from last month's Quorum Court meeting, and there was an ordinance calling for a special election in Washington County on the question of issuing bonds under Amendment Number 62 to the State of Constitution for the purpose of financing all or a portion of the cost of capital improvements, levying a new 1/4 of 1% sales and use tax for the purpose of retiring the bonds, which appears to be what's back before the committee.
Right.
And I just don't think that's procedurally proper. I mean, there's those of us that are not on this committee that have already taken this matter up at Quorum Court, and it wasn't referred back to this committee. So I'm concerned, and the urgency of the issue was expressed at the last meeting about it just advancing to second reading. If it starts over at first reading, you could be at the election before you're on third reading, which will not work. So I think that we need to pay a lot of attention to the procedural propriety of what we're doing, because what appears on our agenda appears to be exactly what's in the packet tonight. Yeah, well, I don't know.
There shouldn't be no bonds on no radio system now.
Well, I'm just telling you that ordinance 3,
Even Ordinance 3 is coming off.
Yeah, they're not even.
It was included and it shouldn't have been included at all.
I guess
And you
I'm trying to say, when this matter is already before the Quorum Court and hasn't been referred back to this committee, I'm a little confused as to what we're doing, so.
Yes, Ann.
We're determining how we're gonna finance the communication system. And I think that's appropriate for this committee to send that recommendation to the court. Not whether we're gonna send it to the people, but how we're going to finance it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, you know what, at this point,
I'm gonna make
it
a
appears
motion.
to me, go ahead.
I'm gonna make a motion that we send it to the Quorum Court,
Which one?
both of them. You gotta have them both.
Well, he's right. The bond council just told us we gotta have ordinance 1 and ordinance 2 to get it to the voter by law. Yes, Ann. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember that discussion so well because I think it was J.P. Yanez that said so eloquently, in looking at this from a voter's point of view, I don't know what I'm voting on. And that was largely what was wrong with that ordinance, that proposed ordinance that has not been redrafted in any way. How are voters going to know that this is implied somehow if all we still have to vote on is what resulted in that comment that I thought was a very accurate comment? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How will the voters know that this is what we're really doing when what was proposed to be on the ballot didn't give any information?
Can we not just amend that and move it forward?
And
It would take it back to first
Well,
have to go back to first reading, and we'd almost need to scrap it, I think.
Well, we have the option of go ahead and moving through the second and third readings if we need to.
All right, we've got a motion on the floor, and I second the motion.
Okay, motion, yes, sir. Somebody else want to say something? Oh, public comment? Okay. Have any public comment?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
excuse me, sir, would you mind if he could explain why he's tying Ordinance 1 and Ordinance 2 together? I'm sorry.
Okay, she wants you to explain why ordinance 1 and 2 are required to pass this on to the voters.
Right.
No.
It's just the state legislation.
There you go.
You're levying, there's got to be a tax levy, and then the other ordinance just refers it to a vote.
Okay, could you give a little bit more detail other than it's state mandated. I'm trying to pull out the information from you, so that way everybody, okay,
Right,
can you bring a little bit more
Well,
clarification?
the first ordinance levies the tax and tells how it's levied and what the purpose is. It tells the amount of time the tax will be collected. So it gives the purpose for the tax, the levy, the tax rate, the law it's levied under, state law, and the statutes say you gotta have an ordinance levying separate the tax. The second ordinance is merely a way to get ordinance 1 that you've passed before the voters. So all ordinance 2 does is call the special election. Now, for special election purposes, as far as timing is concerned, you have to pass the ordinances calling the election at least 70 days in advance of a primary election, which is what you're talking about. Now, if we were not talking about a primary or a runoff election, then we would be at 60 days in advance. So that's all set up by the legislature.
Okay. Okay.
Is that, okay.
Okay, let's go to public comments then. Oh, I'm sorry, Eva, go ahead.
The ordinance that we considered at Quorum Court specifically says it levies the tax. So I don't,
It's the.
Restate that.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I drafted all these but the legislation, there are a myriad of tax, sales and use tax pieces of legislation that evolved over the years. One little piece involves bonds, and it has a procedure for how you call the election and levy the tax in the same ordinance. And so that's why that one is done differently. So ordinance number 3 was just a combination where the tax is just used to pay the bonds. It's set up under that statute that way. And the others is just different, why you use 2. And the bond one accomplishes the same thing that 2 ordinances did under the other statute. But it's just,
to make sure Justice Ecke heard me, the ordinance that we considered last month specifically says that it levies a new 1/4 of 1% sales and use tax for the purpose of retiring such bonds. So that's why I was confused. Thank you, Mr.
And I was
Chairman.
confused because I was sick last month and missed the meeting, and I tried to watch it, but it was too painful anyway. Never
know what?
mind.
I'm sure this is
That's all
all
I have to
due
say
to the
about
full
that.
moon out there. Everything goes crazy.
it is confusing, there's no doubt.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and have a public comment. There was, had somebody wanted to come talk? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Butch.
While somebody was coming forward, your time doesn't start till Hey, keep in mind, because the comments made here to avoid confusion, we're not passing any kind of anything except to the full quorum court where it can be considered between now and then before anybody votes a yes or no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Go ahead, who are you? And
Sarah Moore, Fayetteville, Arkansas. I just have to say that any decisions that we go down the road for is something that's this important and going to have lasting implications for our county for a number of years and to probably potentially into my lifetime. I don't know when we'll have to replace it again. I get concerned when in the conversation a lot of wording's used like we need to hurry up and we need to get this on the ballot, and I feel a sense of rushing because I don't know about you, but whenever I'm rushing, I don't make my best decisions. And so I am just charging you with, as the body over the purse strings, if you're going to come to me as a taxpayer without all of the details fleshed out, not understanding exactly what we're going to purchase ultimately, I'd like to hear a lot more of that before I hear a rush to get this on the ballot. So I just hope you'll pause and not look so much to rush to get this on the March ballot, but we'll have a lot more details fleshed out, more discussion, especially on something that could cost us $10 million. Thanks.
thank you. Any other public comments? You know, I'd like to make one comment about this thing. If we go ahead and pass this, there's going to be a 3-month period before the election occurs. So there's not going to be any sparsity of information. We've talked about this at some length. It's very obvious that there's a need for radio systems here in the county. And that's been reviewed, discussed, and just worn out. So it's just a matter now of going ahead and getting something out here that we can put on the ballot. This sunsets in 1 year or when the loan is paid off. So I don't think there's any great confusion about that. Yes, sir.
You know, what seems like a rush, and it's like I said, this only passes it to the full quorum court. If what we want to do is try to have this on the regular election, the ballot, and because generally people don't really appreciate every time they turn around having some kind of a special election to pass something. We're trying to have this on a ballot that where everybody in the county, or hopefully that votes, would be coming to vote.
Yep.
Not some kind of special deal we're trying to railroad through.
Yep.
Thank you.
Ms. Eva?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to agree with Ms. Moore. All that appeared on our agenda tonight was a public safety communications sales and use tax discussion. We weren't given ordinances until we got here, and they are multiple pages, single space, front and back, of bond and lawyer language, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm not through all this. And it appears that what's attached as 3 is what we're not considering, which is supposed to be identical to what is before the court, is not identical. So I have to agree that it seems like we're surely rushing something, and we should make sure it's right before we put it to the voters, not leading up to the election. So I'll be voting against this in quorum court. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ann?
Our volunteer fire departments, our sheriff's department, all the small police departments, everybody has been working on this for over a year. This is not a hurry up, rush something, do something. We're a lightning strike away from not having a communication system in this county. So we need to make a decision of how we are going to fund it. This is not a hurry-up, rush thing. People have been studying this to death for the last 1.5 to 2 years. And because certain people on the Quorum Court have not been involved in this, I mean, you know, there are other, you know, and I realize a lot of people are still working, have jobs and that kind of thing, so they are not going to all these meetings where this is being hashed out. And I really have a problem with people there, and I'm not saying that you're not knowledgeable, but this has been an ongoing process. We need to make a decision. Thank you.
Okay. Hey, you know,
I would love to reclaim my time of public comment if I can. Is that possible? No? Sorry.
somebody, Patrick?
First of all, let me apologize. I've tried to keep my mouth shut because I realize I'm not on this committee. I have no doubt there's a demonstrated need about the communications and that the communications working group's done a wonderful job of telling us what they need. The failure is on this Quorum Court, and the failure is on our side of how we're going to fund this, collect, and spend these taxes. I'm not questioning the work that's went up to this point. I'm questioning the work on the back end. I want every one of you guys on this committee to realize how important you are. The work you're doing here is very important. It's not let's pass it up to the full Quorum Court to hash it out at a later date. You guys, we're relying on you, the people that aren't on this committee, to hash it out. I think there's a lot of confusion that goes back to the fact that there was no ordinance passed out of this committee last month up to the full Quorum Court. There was nothing in final draft form. It was just a concept that was passed up to us, which I believe is inappropriate. We haven't done our homework to this point. We owe it to the firemen and the first responders to get this right on our end. I'm not questioning the need or the work that's been done by their angle.
What's your proposal at this point?
I think if you as a committee find this appropriate, these two ordinances, you could pass these on to the Quorum Court. We would then have 2 ordinances at Quorum Court, and we need to kill one.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that I agree with both J.P. Harbison and J.P. Dinkins. The problem is, I mean, we have worked on it. I know especially J.P. Lemming has worked on this. A lot of other folks have worked on it, and we are dangerously close to not being able to communicate. That doesn't excuse not having something clear in front of us. Now, we don't write this stuff. We have staff that writes these things, and I think that's where the problem is. There's some not communication going between the working people and the people who are responsible with the people writing this.
Okay. Okay, Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I feel very torn at this moment because I fully support putting this out into the election, the primary, but to me, it just feels overwhelming because I came in and like JP, Madison said, it's pages that I haven't read. It makes me uncomfortable. I really, I want to support fully, and it's put me in a spot tonight that I was not ready for. I wasn't prepared to be in this spot because I absolutely support getting this going, but I can't vote yes without reading this.
You know what? I think there's a lot of us in this room that were surprised. When I got here, first time I'd seen it, period. And so, yes,
If we could take, by the clock, whatever, 10 minutes and have, I apologize to the gentleman, the bondsman, to go through it. It won't take 10 minutes to read through this, and if there's any clarification that he feels it needs to be made in this language, at least this way we will go through it together and we will all hear the same thing, if you so choose. It's up
That-
to you, Mr. Chair.
Ms.
That is
Baumann, would you come
my
back? And Mr.
recommendation.
Shep, would you come back? Are you wanting to read through this whole thing?
Sure.
Read through the whole thing and discuss it, okay?
That's fine.
You got the mic.
And I do apologize, Mr. Chair. Your name again, please.
Shep Russell.
Shep Russell. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Lisa Ecke. No, thank you.
Okay. The ordinance number 1, the first whereas clause describes what you've determined is needed here in the county. That phraseology is what is used throughout both ordinances. So that if you read right there what it is: acquire, construct, improve, expand, equip, and maintain public safety communication system facilities and apparatus, including any necessary land acquisition, utility, and road improvements. That's just in case you're gonna have to build something, you gotta get to it. Maybe you have to buy some right-of-way, maybe you have to build a road to it. I'm not sure, but it's to cover those type of contingencies. So that language right there is throughout the 2, where it says what the tax is going to go for. Then the second whereas clause says what the authorizing state legislation is to levy the tax we're using. Okay, and that basically says you can do these in increments of 1/8. So then it's the third whereas clause says what the Quorum Court is deciding is that to levy a sales and use tax at the rate of 1/4 of 1% for 12 months, with the county receiving all the funds and not any of the municipalities. Okay. So Article 1 is the technical language out of the state statutes on what is being taxed, the sales and uses. And if you just read that, just a 1/4 cent on the sale, it's the same language for all of your sales and use tax ordinances. And it says it will be used, the state deducts, gets a commission, And for big transactions, industries or big users can file for rebates. So it's saying whatever's left over after that is going to go to the county, and it's going to be used for what we described in the first paragraph. It says that the tax is only levied up to the maximum amount allowed by law. That's because the legislature has sometimes changed what we refer to as the single transaction definition. So that's a generic phrase now. Article 2 says the net collections will only be distributed to the county and not the municipalities, to make sure that everyone understands that. Article 3 says it's levied and collected only for a period of 12 months. It'll commence, if the voters approve it, it will commence July 1 of 2020 and expire June 30 of 2021. So July 1, you would start getting the money in September, and you'd be getting 12 months of collections. Article 5 says that this ordinance doesn't take effect unless the voters approve this tax. So it's levied. Okay, so that's ordinance number 1.
Question, yeah.
Can I throw one thing in there? That July 1, the infrastructure of the AWIN radio system, if we do not sign a contract by June the 1st, will cost us another $1.5 million. That will happen if we do not get. We say we're in a hurry. We are kind of in a hurry because we're mandated by the state, by Motorola, what's happening, and we have to play their game. We have to do it the way they want us to do it. So just keep in mind, if it don't happen by June, I think 30th, it's somewhere right there. It wasn't about a week's difference. We think that'll be fine. But if it don't happen by July 1st, it's going to cost you another $1.5 million. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
I just want to make sure, as you're explaining, that you help us understand the coordination between 1, 2, and then this alternative that looks like 3 that's before us.
Okay.
Because I look at the one that's before us now that it also levies a tax and
Correct.
calls for an election. So I just sort of,
Correct.
we need to understand that, how they all coordinate.
Thank you. I'll do that. Let me just explain about the July 1 just real quick so you'll understand. When the legislature had to pass the Uniform Streamlined Sales Tax Act in order to get out of state, these internet sales. And to do that, we had to agree in a compact to when taxes would go into effect. And so you have to have your election, publish your proclamation, 90 days goes by, and it's the first day of a calendar quarter. So there's really not anything you can do about what date it is. It's got to be a calendar quarter, and 90 days has to go by. So for instance, just to have your tax in effect by July 1, it would have to be held, the election would have to be held in March. It's just that in this case, the legislature has said that elections can be monthly, but if there's a preferential primary election, it's got to be held on that day, and they set March 3 is the day for this year, next year. So I just want to make sure you understood. If you decide you would like to study it further and pass it later on, then everything moves down the line. So, and I'll explain the significance a little bit of that as compared to ordinance number 3. But ordinance number 2, it just says in the first paragraph, we passed this ordinance number 1. You fill those blanks in, and the purpose is to call a special election. And Article 1 calls the election for March 3 of 2020. And in order to do that, you've got to pass the ordinance filed with the county clerk at least 70 days in advance. Okay, so that's your time deadline. Article 2 has the ballot language in there. If you look at it, the tax rate, 1/4 of 1%, the time it's gonna be collected, period of 12 months, the next net collections remaining after the administrative charges of the state required rebate will be given just to the county. And then it's gonna be used for the magic language we've gone over, so that, for instance, if you were studying this ordinance and you wanted to change that, it'd need to change in a number of spots. So, Article 3, just is, some of this is standard language, the election, how the election is held. The results in Article 4, the results are proclaimed. County judge would have to do a proclamation. Article 5 says what your time deadlines are for filing with the county clerk and providing information to the Washington County Board of Election Commissioners. And Article 6 is a general catch-all to give the county judge and county clerk to do anything necessary to get the election called and held. Article 7 is what they call all ordinances, parts thereof in conflict or repealed. Article 8 just says that the provisions are separable. So
Mr.
that's,
Russell, I guess my only point of confusion here, on ordinance 3, down toward the bottom of the page, it mentions a 1/2 cent sales tax.
well, if it's in there,
Oh, that's right, that's right. Yep, okay, sorry. Okay, and that one's taken away. Well,
All right.
from what I understand,
all right, well, just,
we can go ahead and move this to the Quorum Court, and it has an opportunity to be amended on the Quorum Court. So if there's anything that is of concern to our group, we can go ahead and, as a Quorum Court, amend the doggone thing we pass up. So I'm gonna ask you to go ahead and let's look at the second and third reading on this thing tonight. Yes, Eva?
Mr. Russell's a good lawyer from a
Yeah.
good law firm.
Yeah.
So I still need to understand the one that's before us at Quorum Court, which I think is similar to 3, even though it's not up. I need to understand how 1 and 2 interact with 3. So that will just help us, and he probably won't be back next week.
Okay, all right,
His hourly rate's
all
high.
right, good. Go ahead.
So I just want to understand that. So that next, it seems to me like we're either doing 3 or 1 and 2.
that is correct.
Okay. Whew.
That is correct.
Progress.
And it's kind of like,
State that
well,
again.
I mean,
Emphasize
you're
that again.
either gonna do number 3 or number 1 and number 2. Now, I would like to see what, though, I have to tell you, there've been various versions of this, because this started out, as jail. Then the the public safety got added on to that. That died for further study. At one time, 1 and 2 were to operate and maintain jail and law enforcement facilities. So, now we're back on 3, and I read.
3 is not like the 3 that's before us. It's similar.
Right,
So-
but is it just for public safety communication? I don't know
Yep.
what,
Yes,
that's all it is. It doesn't mention anything about jails or.
No,
it's
it
not
was,
jail.
it was only for the purpose of, I read it earlier, levying the tax.
Yeah.
And doing bonds.
Okay.
And calling the election. It did it all in one.
So, let me explain, because I don't know the timeline you're on, I'm not familiar with. But the primary difference is that with a bond, if you borrowed the money, if you had a successful election and you went and borrowed the money short term, you pay the principal and interest back out of these tax collections, and you can borrow the money really after the election's final and the Quorum Court approves it. When there's enough money to pay the bond off, and the bond ballot has a maximum amount, and you can go borrow up to that amount, then certain things are filed with the Department of Finance and Administration, and it terminates this tax. When the tax, there, as you can imagine, there's no way to predict the exact amount of money you're gonna get. It's impossible. And so, but most of the time, you're gonna collect more money than, you gotta have some cushion. You're gonna collect more money. So at the end of the period, when the bonds pay, the Constitution said, recognizing that this is an issue, says that the surplus, whatever's collected over and above, is used for any purpose approved by the Quorum Court, okay? So that's the way that works. It can terminate as early as when you got enough money accumulated and filed to get that done. With a debt that the voters have approved, you can pay the principal and interest on that debt out of the money. Principal and interest. And that's all it can be used for, except the surplus at the end. Now, with what I'm gonna call a pay-as-you-go tax, you got two choices there. You either, you're gonna start getting the money in September, hypothetically, if this was approved in March. And that money will come in, you can accumulate it and pay without borrowing. If you can, depending on what the arrangement is with whoever's providing this system, or how you're gonna order it, pay, how all that's supposed to work. Or you can borrow under Amendment 78 against it without the voters approving it, but the catch is you gotta pay the interest out of county general, because the Constitution says on what we call short-term borrowing, which is less than 5 years, 5 years or less, that the bonds are, the debt's payable from the general revenues of the county. So if you wanted to do a pay-as-you-go and not borrow any money, that's optimum. If, of course, that way you gotta be waiting until September. If you wanted to go to the bank and borrow against it, you have to treat it as like we're paying back expenditures being made, but you can't do the interest, which means the Quorum Court would have to budget some interest, which wouldn't be much, but it would be something. And so that's always the decision, why it's a real decision. Do we go pay as you go and present that? Or do we have the debt authorized? In both cases, you're going to get a 1/4 cent sales and use tax. In both cases, it's going to probably be levied for the same amount of time.
Okay. All right, Mr. Lemming, you served on that committee.
Question, if we done a bond, do you think we would have enough interest to pay, would we have enough interest in there to pay the, say, the $270,000 that it would cost us for a bond? Would the money?
Would you generate enough
Yes.
interest earnings
Yeah,
to do that?
Would that offset that sum?
It would offset it
Because
some.
you
I
might
don't
wind
think
up-
it's not going to probably be 270,000.
Well, I'm on 10.5 million, it'd be quite a bit.
Yeah.
If you done a bond on that, and if it was
Yeah.
270,000, say if it cost us 60,000 for that bond, at the end of the day, 60,000 on 10 million is not that much.
Right, it would be a short-term bond. And Kevin Falk with Stevens Incorporated is here if
Would it-
this committee had
I'm
any
not
questions.
positive, and might need to ask John, but is it so that we cannot sign a contract with the provider of the AWIN system until we have all the money in hand, or is that set up with the person that does it?
Well, that's always an issue for counties, whether you can sign your contract beyond your revenues for a year, and that would just have to be looked at. But if you decided to do this short-term borrowing, and if you were willing to pay the interest on it out of county general, without a bond, you could borrow the money. But again, due to this, the way this constitutional provision is written, you'd have to pay the interest out of the.
If we done, the infrastructure is gonna cost $4.9 1.57 million. If we borrowed the bond, would you have to do two bonds? Say, we don't need a radio, we don't need to buy a radio because it's gonna take them 18 months to build it. So you're gonna buy $3.1 million worth of radios. Why buy them up front? Why not buy them at the end when you don't need them? I mean, you're a year out. So
I mean, that's,
could you split the bonds and be cheaper?
well, you don't have to issue all the bonds. You don't have to, the voters approve a maximum amount of bonds, and it's up to the Quorum Court to determine how much to borrow,
Okay.
through a bond.
Okay. We
So
got two,
you could, having said that, I mean, the tax is only supposed to be used to pay the bond. It's not like you could, have a bond for some and use the tax for others, unless you were to like to divide, make this, and I don't know if after hearing the discussion, if you're there, if you want to do an eighth and an eighth or something like that, probably wouldn't.
Let's just wanna do it the easiest,
I know.
quickest.
okay, Ms. Madison?
I think after listening to Mr. Russell and having time to look at what's before us, so it appears that the third ordinance that Mr. Russell's provided that we're not considering is a combination of this issue that's before us in the Quorum Court and the jail. And if you take out the provisions that relate to the jail financing bonds, you have left what is before us at Quorum Court. So it's
Okay.
like someone took Mr. Russell's third ordinance, deleted the provisions
Right.
to the jail.
Yeah.
That's what's before us.
Yeah.
So the financing option that's on second reading at the Quorum Court is to finance this with bonds. He is offering us the alternative of 1 and 2, which is to finance to pay as you go without bonds. And so I'm now of the opinion that they all need to be together, but 3 doesn't need to go on because it looks like the right provisions of 3 are already before us. And I know that some people had some panic thinking we were going to consider a jail ordinance tonight, but that's not. So
Okay.
it looks like the things that related to the jail out of 3 were pulled out, and
Yeah.
that's what's left.
Yep.
So if the court wants to have this option of 2 different ways to finance, I think 1 and 2 should come out.
True. And I was told just before the meeting started, we was gonna pull ordinance 3, so, Sue?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a real technical kind of question. Early on in our discussions, there was thought that because the rural fire departments don't pay sales tax, that the county would give them the money to buy their radios, so they wouldn't pay sales tax. Because if the county bought their radios, we would have to pay sales tax. And I was a little bothered and called legislative audit about the county giving money and found that there was a constitutional issue with that. Is that kind of thought ahead of time necessary for these bonds? Do we have to have had those decisions made?
Well,
Or is that something that we can pass the bonds and then nail down?
well, the bond money would have to be used by the county itself to buy the items.
So we could,
And in my opinion, now I haven't talked to Brian about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
so we wouldn't be, we don't need language in here on how we're gonna pay for the fire department's radios. We should just follow the law and constitution when we get around to it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask John, you've been involved in this whole process. Can you come shed some light on that for us? Thank you, Shep.
Yes. Do you mind if I look at your index?
John Luther, Emergency Manager for Washington
All right,
County.
speak up now so we can hear you.
Scoot the mic up closer, is that better? I'm typically not accused of being quiet, so I apologize. To answer your question, Ms. Madison, we've done this before. The county acquires the said equipment, whether it be a vehicle, radio, night vision goggles, whatever that may be. We do this through grants. We've done this through general fund expenditures. And what we do is we retain the ownership of the item, we retain an inventory of the item, and we issue the item to the agency or responder that needs to use it in the field. And it is a responsibility of that agency to maintain it put gas in it, tires on it, a battery, whatever that may be. But it ultimately is still the ownership of Washington County, and then disposal is the responsibility of the county, whether it's no longer any good or it can be brought back and re-provisioned, et cetera.
Okay.
So that's the simplest way and safest way to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm gonna ask that the court goes ahead, this committee goes ahead and looks at the second and third reading on this thing and pass it on to full quorum court. If it needs to be amended at that time, then let it be amended. Yes, sir.
Question, do we do that in committee? Do we do second and third readings in committee?
All we do is pass it to the court.
Okay,
There's a motion and an
all
agenda.
right, I'm looking for a motion.
You done had it.
And a second? All right. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Can I
Yes, sir.
say one more thing?
Yes, please.
Is there anybody on this committee that are on the Quorum Court that hadn't got enough information? Because John will get you all you need, I'll get you all you need, and if you need it explained to you, if I can't explain it, John can. If John can't, he'll get some help. So if there's anybody here that needs any information, let us know. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Madison?
I do think that at some point, someone should help us figure out which of these two ways is the right way. Because I'm not a finance expert, and
Yeah.
so whether we pay as we go or finance it with bonds is
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
I'm going to need help on.
Okay. I'll ask for help on that issue before our quorum court meeting.
And
Okay?
I will say this
Yes.
related to that question.
Sir?
It's been said many times that we know the vulnerability of our current system. I think the county would be wise in placing itself in the best position to immediately replace our radio system without having to wait. I don't want to come here to try to scare anyone. The system is working, but we do not know how long, and that is simply a fact.
So you feel we need to do the bond and pay for the radios immediately and get, I thought it was gonna
I
take,
don't know that the radios have to be purchased immediately, like J.P. Lemming said. They can wait until the system is prepared to be operational.
All right.
But I certainly think the sooner the county can take action to implement the contract and move forward with the build-out process, that is certainly the way that I would go.
thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
I'll tell you what, before the quorum court meeting, I will ask for specific information to be brought to us about all these options. Okay?
Yes, sir.
John, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Just want to let you know that, when was it? Last month, no, October, when we had the real bad thunderstorms move in and the tornadoes.
Yep.
Springdale Country Club had one of their tallest trees zapped by lightning. I mean, it hit that thing really hard. So we're not that far away, and if it can hit, and we're saying we're one lightning strike away.
I paid a bill this week related to a microwave dish, the large dishes that go on the tower sites themselves that connect the dishes together. And that builds the network, the backhaul as we call it. And I replaced the one in Elkins after that storm because it was hit by lightning. It was blown into some pieces. I've actually got a souvenir piece on an office stand there next to my desk. Thankfully, that was not the main unit that controls this radio system we have, or we would have been in a bad shape. Thankfully, that one was a outlier. It was able to be repaired. But you make a very valid point, and that is we just do not know. And when I got that phone call, it truly scared me because when they said, hey, we've had a lightning strike, my concern is it's the main controller. Thankfully, it was not. But had it been a short distance away, the geography for storms is small. They move very quickly, so we were very fortunate that it was not that one, but it can happen, and it most recently did.
And just for one last question, how long have you been working on this project?
Well,
No, seriously,
certainly more than a
it's
year.
been on the it's been
Certainly
on the
more than a year.
horizon.
When we implemented the system many years ago in about '05, you start
There you go.
looking toward what is next. And we've made upgrades to our system throughout that time period. And so we realized when our system ended life, we had to make changes, and so we started our studies then. We formally, obviously, did this once the committee was put together at the request of.
But you've been researching, and once it was on the horizon is when you started moving forward, and you did your research,
Yes, ma'am.
and in order to present it to the committee.
Right. And
I'm
and
just
we've
trying
been,
everybody to understand that there is processes and that they might not see,
certainly,
but it's great that they bring up the question so that way we can give the answers.
certainly,
So,
certainly. And we've been users, part-time users of the system that we're asking to go to. It's not new to us. It will be new to us as full-time users. We've been using this system in various capacities for many years, as it's upgraded along the way as well. So it's not new to us. It's not something that we're not familiar with. And operationally, we do trust it, yes.
Thank you, John.
Yes, sir.
I think this demonstrates the urgency involved in this whole process. So let's move on to number 5.
We got a motion and a second, we need to pass it to the Quorum Court.
Oh, I thought we did that.
Need to vote on it.
Okay,
Second.
we did vote. Yeah, we voted. Yeah, done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shep. That's what we voted on.
Voted on it.
We just had a motion and a second. We did say all.
Vote on
Oh, yes,
that.
yes, we did.
We
did, I voted.
Yes, we voted on it.
Thank you. I did. I said aye.
Oh, I wish the full moon would go away. Okay, ordinance 5, an ordinance amending various portions of the planning and development chapter of Washington County Code. Nathan, would you come talk to us about this?
Thank you. I haven't written a script for tonight, so I'm gonna be winging it here. But in the planning office, we've identified a need, and this is the first of many times we'll be visiting with you in order to pitch some good ideas your way and for good discussion. Our large-scale development permit that we have triggers whenever a development other than residential agricultural exceeds 1 acre. And then the progression through the large-scale development permit goes, we'll take the preliminary large-scale plans, which is a conceptual plan. We'll take that through our tech review process and get all the jurisdictional agencies to weigh in with what their requirements would be. Upon approval, then we'll cut the applicant approved for construction letter. That way they can go construct their development according to the concept that was approved at planning board. Then whenever they're done with their construction, they can submit their as-built plans to us in the form of a final large-scale development document or submittal. And then we will, that's whenever we go conduct our inspections. The preliminary or the concept large-scale goes through the technical review process, and we notify the neighbors to get their comment on the record. The final, though, however, after it's done construction, the final doesn't go to tech review, and we don't notify the neighbors on that one either. And what I've noticed after having processed several of these large-scale projects is that it still has to adhere to our planning cycle, even though it doesn't, it's not involved with most of our planning cycle. And so what we see more often than not is we'll have, in knowing that our planning cycle is 5 weeks long, we'll have developers and engineers hurrying at the very last minute in order to get these plans produced to send our way. That way they can make that submittal day. And then they'll sit around for 5 weeks knowing that we're not putting this through tech review, we're not notifying the neighbors, and they'll wait for the planning board meeting 5 weeks out. And then the planning board votes whether or not they want to approve it. Now, throughout that 5-week process, what we've done is we've gone and inspected, we've communicated with the fire marshal, we've communicated with the health department, everybody else who we need to communicate with and say they're ready for an inspection, or maybe they're not. But once they are ready for an inspection, then we'll send those folks their way. And what we would like to do now is change it up just a little bit in that the final large-scale submittal won't go to planning board because what it is they have constructed according to all of the requirements that were brought to light at preliminary stage. And then, so what we would do is when whenever the development is finished out and they've met all of their conditions on paper and on the ground, then they can submit those plans. Instead of having all the signature blocks, so back up just a little bit, the natural progression of the project, once it goes to the planning board for final and gets approval, then the developer will go around and get all the signatures from the utilities and from the health department and from the fire marshal and everybody. Road department, planning board, I sign for the planning board, and then the last person to sign is the county judge. And so what we're proposing to do is to remove the planning board requirement for final, and then remove several of the signature blocks and make the compliance with those entities that have been removed from the signing, like the utilities and the health department and the fire marshal, make all that covered by the engineer's stamp.
Okay.
And the engineer being certified through the state or licensed through the state and carrying different amounts of insurance, but their stamp would be certifying that this development meets all these codes with the electric company and the water company and even the health department and the fire marshal and everybody else. Now, it could be that we would need the engineer's stamp on the final large-scale plan. It could be that we would need his stamp or their stamp plus all of these letters saying that, yes, indeed, we have reviewed this and approved it. But the end goal is whether or not we're getting the letters from saying that it's approved from the utilities and the health department or not. We would like to take it off the planning board agenda and have the engineer stamp cover several other, or basically the whole thing. And so what I've got here, and I haven't seen the ordinance, but I helped write it. I just haven't seen the version that you have. What we would be doing is we would be removing all the signature blocks and replacing them with what Pulaski County has. And that would be the property owner for them to sign saying that, yes, we are dedicating these utility easements and these access easements. And this is my property, and yes, I am aware and agree that I'm dedicating these right-of-ways and easements. The project engineer would stamp and sign, certifying that it meets all of these codes. The road department would sign saying that, yes, all of these easements and rights-of-way are proper, and we are accepting this right-of-way into our county road system with the bonds. And then after 1 year, then the road department would be responsible for maintaining those public roads if they get dedicated to the public use.
It sounds like to me it's removing a lot of redundancy.
Absolutely, sir. And another thing is to get it down to where we can work on the developer's timeline instead of our timeline. And we require you to have that submitted to us on Friday, and then we're not going to give you an answer for 5 weeks.
I got you.
And so it's a lot of times what we tell the developers is, when you get close to the end of construction, go ahead and give me your as-built plans. That way you're not sitting around twiddling your thumbs at the end waiting for that planning board meeting to come around.
Okay, all right.
So we've got property owner, project engineer, the road department, and then the planning administrator, which is me. I would sign for the plat as well, certifying that the plat itself meets the checklist that's in the ordinance and it's in the application. And then lastly would be the county judge to sign after everyone else has.
Okay, and engineer has to sign as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The project engineer. Now, our county engineer would report to me whether or not the final large-scale plan met all the stormwater drainage
Okay,
requirements.
all right. Okay, so it's the project engineer that signed off on all the requirements?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you're gonna be recommending other revisions, and I personally would like to see all those revisions together. It's hard to look at one in isolation, and I'll just tell
No
you
doubt.
that putting something on an agenda that crosses out health department approval and planning board approval and fire marshal approval causes alarm.
I agree. No doubt. I agree.
So I don't want to look at this in isolation as to one portion of the planning process. I feel like we've got to look at it all because I need to see where those other components are falling in. And so it's hard for me to look at this in isolation and say, okay, I'm great with, the health department being out of this and the fire marshal and.
Not out of it.
I know,
Just
but that's
not
what I'm
signing
saying.
on the plat.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what this looks like.
Sure.
I mean, it looks like we've totally supplanted everyone outside of the county judge's office with your approval, the road departments and the county judges. Never mind the health department or the or the fire marshal. And so I heard from a lot of people about this. And I want to see it, the whole thing in its form. I don't think we should piecemeal this. So that's my concern. I think I've heard from enough people that are afraid about what this is taking away from just individual property owners in the county, that this has caused enough alarm that I'm going to withhold judgment until we see it all. If we're considering, I know Ms. J.P. Bowman has been talking about revisions to the planning code for some time.
Yes, ma'am.
We need to see them all because I can't do this piecemeal and create panic by these people that come to the Quorum Court and deal with these processes. So that's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Turn your mic on.
Until we have all the information, because I felt the same way when I looked at this. We were marking out all of the health department and those agencies that control the safety of people in the county. So I think we need to see all of it at once. Second. Thank you.
You got a second? Yep. Okay. We got a motion, second, to table this.
I think it's actually postponed.
Or
Yeah, Butch, go
postpone,
ahead.
yeah,
Butch.
postpone.
Just a minute.
And of course, I'm in support of tabling this also, but I just want to say, our planning department is very conscientious and would not be trying to do something that would totally cut these other entities out of the process.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of table it? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Point of order,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the proper motion is to postpone the ordinance and it's going to be taken off the table at this meeting.
Okay. Would you like to modify
I will
your?
correct the motion and say we will postpone this until we have additional information. Thank you.
A second on that? Yes. All right. Yes, sir.
May I ask just a quick question for
Yeah.
my own clarification?
Yeah.
There are a lot of changes that we're looking to make to the planning code, large scale subdivision, CUP code. Are you talking about you want to see the entire list before, or just the items that we're wanting to do with large scale, and then the items we're wanting to do with subdivision?
Okay.
I'm curious which everything you're talking about.
Okay, so we'll try to get this on the next Quorum Court meeting.
Okay.
I mean, next county services meeting.
Wait.
I'm gonna ask Nathan a question.
Yeah.
Nathan, how many areas do we have that is in Washington County that is not covered under the planning?
There's a couple, and they're small. They're individual properties, sometimes 2 or 3 together. There's some out on East 412, and I don't know the number, but I know there's 3 areas. Some out East 412, some out West 412, and some down around Lincoln.
Well, how do we get them covered?
That'd probably be in on the list.
Because we had an incident in Perry Grove. They put a propane tank right
Yes, sir.
underneath the power line. We fought that battle.
No
Well,
county zoning on that property.
That's right, and that wasn't right, where they put it and all that. We made them put a guardrail in. Well, they was a drunk, decided to break them electric poles plumb off, 2 of them, right
After the
over
tank went
top
in?
of that tank,
Oh,
that
God.
last Friday.
I would-
And I think that could have been a real disaster, a little bit more than if what didn't happen to everything, so.
Started off requiring the permitting on that, and then realized. But yes, I
But
agree
if we
that
got
those need
them
to be added.
areas, we need to know what we need to do to get all, if Washington County's Washington County, it's all Washington County, and it's all
sir.
plays by the same rules, so we need to know what we need to do to get everybody in.
Strongly agree.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor of the, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear, the stricken language, what it is, it was kind of scary to read that, and I understand, so I definitely agree with that. But there was also missing sections from the original to the beginning, and you said you haven't seen this ordinance?
Not what you have,
Not
but
what I have. So
assisted
was this just
the attorney and
the,
law clerk in
our county attorney?
making the changes, yes.
Who put this good, because we have missing sections from 1A and B, missing section 2, 3, missing section 4B through E, missing sections 5, 6, and 7. So there's a lot that's been taken out. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody, and you'd seen that as well, because it's not just stricken language. There are sections that have been completely deleted from this ordinance.
Okay.
So that's something to take a look at. Thank you.
Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right,
Thank you.
let's see what's next. Oh, yeah, we got Ann's,
Sunset Fire Department.
yeah, thank you, Ann, go ahead.
I'm just gonna make a motion that we, it's a standard ordinance that these fire departments use. And that we go on and
Hey.
pass to the Quorum Court,
Please don't talk while she's trying to get a motion made.
to the Quorum Court that will allow the Sunset Fire Department to put their dues on the election on March the 4th.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Does everybody understand what she's talking about? Okay.
Oh, okay.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passed.
Which one?
I'm sorry?
Okay, consent agenda. I'll make a motion, we put it on the consent agenda.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, I guess we've got time for, public comments. Any additional public comments? Who are you and where are you from?
Can't hear you. It's
No,
not on.
the center button, right in the middle. There you go.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sherry Main, 15574 Riches Road, Fayetteville. I'm glad that you went ahead and postponed this, the ordinance to amend the portions of the Planning and Development chapter of the Washington County Code. It concerned me a great deal, and especially the time that they decided to change it all of a sudden. But what concerned me the most about it was some of the changes in here I read that they wanted to change, and some of the sections that they wanted to leave out and delete entirely. And as I read through some of these, J.P. Jenkins had forwarded this to me. I went through and I marked some of just the corrections in red that were on this, that I just pointed out that were error in writing it. As I went through and compared it to the last one, I think it needs attention drawn to it. But I compared this with the articles of 1174, 75, 76, and 77 as they are written currently in the ordinance now. And basically what they're taking out and what they're putting in is further checks and balances into the system that we have now. And they're taking that out and giving the authority to two people. And in my opinion, I disagree with that. I don't think that the final sign-off sheet should be two people's signatures. And it further goes on, if you'll read as the ordinances tie together and what they left in, on the road dedication, that the judge gets the authority on what they're adding in 11.6 of the ordinance that they're adding or wanting to amend, and the full amended part, it says 11.6 county judge approval, the road easement dedications shown are approved. Acceptance of roads and streets into the county road system will occur after they are constructed to Washington County specifications. He's accepting the road easement dedications before they are constructed to the Washington County specifications. So, and then if you look back at section, the existing ordinances relating to the roads as they are written, it references that any type of road maintenance or any concerns of the roads have to be approved by the judge. And,
Ma'am, your 2 minutes are up.
well, I just want to make one more point, and it says that
3 minutes, yeah.
in the rules of the judge on the roads, it says that it's up to the judge to decide, and it can be,
Ma'am, we'll be getting a lot more information about this, so,
well, I'm just saying,
okay,
you need to look at it because it's
thank you.
haphazard and it's written very poorly and it's just pulled together at the very last minute,
Any other public
in my
comments?
opinion.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Beth Koger, Fayetteville. I do have a comment back to what J.P. Lemming said, if we had questions. I do have some questions. You said you had the information. And speaking for myself as a taxpayer and for other people who are taxpayers who are public, I'd like to know how it came. Originally, it started out at 14 million. Then when we started talking about it a few months ago, the court was mentioning 6 to 8 million, and then it was 8.5 million. I'm talking about the communication stuff. And then tonight, I think J.P. Lemming mentioned 10.5 million. So I'd just like to know, how it gets from 14 to 6 to 8 to 10 and a half. Maybe we could meet sometime on that, Mr. Lemming.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Any other public comment? Okay, I believe we're at point of motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? We're adjourned.